We are streaming. All right, welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool. And Jonathan, today we have a special guest waiting in the green room. I tell you, you took some action on this, Jonathan. Like our guest last week, Sir Kevin Halbert,
that's right,
recommended a book, and you jumped on.
I jumped
the
on
book,
it.
And then got the author's information and had them booked within 24 hours of that show. So
that's
right. You were excited about this one.
So if it came, I ordered it while, I literally ordered it while we were on, while we were talking with Kevin, because he mentioned this book, and he didn't just mention it, he recommended it.
Yes, highly recommended it.
Highly recommended this book called Wired for Story. I ordered it, and I love Amazon because you get it like the next day. And jumped on it. So I had some time the last weekend, and man, I just went through it. I couldn't put it down. It was very interesting. So that's what we're going to talk about. We have.
I think you've got the bio, so I'll let you bring her on.
So our guest today is Lisa Cron. She is the author of the book that I just mentioned, Wired for Story. We're going to be talking about that. She's also got another book out. And somehow I didn't put these two together because I bought this book. I've had this book for a couple of years and I read it. But when Kevin mentioned Wired for Story, I didn't put it together that she's also written Story or Die. This is actually her latest book, going back a few years. But and we might take some examples from that because I underlined a lot of stuff in that one. But
she mentioned she has a third book too, so we'll have to find out what that is.
Yep, she does. And then, but Wired for Story is incredible. I haven't read her other book, but let me just pull up her bio real quick. She is an author of the book we're going to be discussing today. And since 2006, she's been an instructor in the UCLA Extension Writers Program and has been on the faculty of the School of Visual Arts MFA program in visual narrative in New York City. She works with writers, nonprofits, educators, and organizations, helping them master the unparalleled power of story so that they can move people to action, whether that action is turning the pages of a compelling novel or taking to the streets to change the world for the better, or even both. So we're happy to have Lisa join us today on podcast.
Let's bring her on.
Bring her on.
Hello.
Hey, Lisa. How are you?
I'm teaching.
Good. So you work with real writers then, huh? Not us wannabe writers that are writing copy instead.
Oh, I think everybody's a writer.
Oh, do you?
All writers. Yeah, 100%.
Really?
100%.
That's interesting.
I do work mostly with novelists and screenwriters and memoirists, but also with people who are trying to change the world actively.
Yeah. Speech writers, those kind of people, that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's very cool. So this is good because we've had some conversations around story, but not from quite this vantage point. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on it. So yeah, I'm excited to hear that as we move forward. What's before we do our beverages real quick, what's the reason people should stick around? Maybe they've heard about story and they hear story is important, but what do you bring into the show?
Well, here's the thing. Story is how we make sense of everything. Story is hardwired into the brain. It's literally how you, me, all of us are making sense of everything that happens to us every minute of every day. And here's the crucial thing. Story is not in any way, shape, or form the way it's been sold as soft science. Story is hard science. You are affected by stories every minute of every day, whether you're aware of it or not. And usually you are not. So really understanding how it works can help you from getting sucked into stories that turn out not to be true.
Yeah. There's a few of those going around as well, aren't there?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So doesn't matter which side you're on. They're flying both directions. That's for sure. So,
yep.
All right. Well, Lisa, we always let our guests go first. So are you having a beverage today? You're having.
I am. And it's just Water?
The original
The
beverage.
Original, one and
It
only.
doesn't get better. Unadulterated, one hopes
Yep.
anyway.
I've actually got a
Here's
bottle of
the
water
bottle.
myself here.
Do you do filtered water, delivered water, bottled water? Like, there's so many
filter
options these days. Yeah.
Filtered.
Okay.
I filter it.
All right. Do you have a fancy like Berkeley filter or one of those things, or just kind of out of the fridge filtered?
Just, yeah, out of the fridge fill. Well, I put it
Yeah.
in the fridge in a, I think it's Britex or whatever it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
One of those ones where you're supposed to like change the filter, I think, at some point. So it might not be filtered anymore, or just technically, but
Less
ineffectually
filtered, slightly less filtered, or something like that.
Exactly.
I mean, the earth filters it through like rock and dirt and limestone. So I guess a filter could be, so anyway. So yeah, very good. Water, the original beverage.
Yeah.
Jonathan, what do you have up in your neck of the woods?
Well, I'm drinking root beer. But it's not just any root beer. It is a not your father's root beer. Okay. Yes. So it's I think I shared this with you last week. I was thinking about having it last week, but I kind of pushed it out.
I think we've had that before, haven't we? At least once.
Yep. It's a popular alcoholic root beer with 5.9% ABV. I didn't realize this, but they have some 10% versions out there.
Wow.
So I didn't realize this. And they also have, I was looking at their website, they also have like cannabis infused, not your father's root beer, not your father's cola, all of that stuff. Yeah. So cool. I am not having the cannabis. I'm having the alcohol version.
Well, funny you should say that. Because I am having a Smoking Dog cherry lime THC beverage.
All right. Okay.
So it's only 5 milligrams, so it's very light.
Yeah.
So I'm having the cannabis. The cannabis root beer, though, sounds good. I might have to go find that. That does sound pretty good.
Over at
cherry lime.
PapsLabs, papslabs.com.
Paps Labs.
Not from the Paps Paps Blue Ribbon. I don't think that's the same one. So,
all right. Well, yeah. Well, let's cheers it up to a good show. To story.
Yes. Lisa, I thought about your book last week because we went to see the movie Project Hail Mary. We went to see that last Friday. So I was thinking about, because I was reading your book on Saturday, so it was kind of fresh. The movie was fresh in my mind. And I think there's a lot of good examples on character. You talk about just having a good story, not just writing well, but having a good story. That's the main thing. And there's some things that go into that. And I'm thinking the main character in this story or in this movie, it's interesting how it plays out. And we'll get into that. But Sean, I know you've seen the movie, and I don't want to give too much away. If
it's still fresh, so we don't want to have any spoilers or anything. Have you seen the movie yet, Lisa?
No.
Are you a big movie person?
Yeah. I used to be way more than now. I liked movies way better back in the day than now.
Yeah.
You said you did read the book, though?
No, I read part of it.
Okay.
I read the beginning. I know the premise.
Yeah. It was a good movie. I don't think it was one of my favorites, but it was definitely good. I think the director's cut was originally 4 hours, and they trimmed it down to 228. So maybe I can't wait for the director's cut to come out. I want to see how it might evolve differently, with that. But yeah. Well, Lisa, tell us how you got into the world of story as a career and all that. Give us a little background, and then we'll actually start talking about the hard science. I love that you called it a hard science.
It is hard
cool.
science.
Yeah.
Yeah. I started out in publishing, and then I moved to some screenwriting, and then I moved to reading manuscripts for the movie studios, for William Morris when it was just William Morris, and Warner Brothers. And so I was reading. I had a background in it to begin with. I was pulled into story from when I was a kid. But what I discovered in writing is called coverage for the movies. It's like you read something and then you can't just go make a movie out of that, or, are you kidding me? Definitely not. You have to say why. So, and I was reading mostly books to film. So it was unpublished manuscripts that were then the agents were looking to go, could this or could this be into a movie, or the studio was. And what I discovered really pretty early on is that what I'd been taught pulled us in, didn't, that wasn't beautiful writing, writing well. It doesn't even mean anything, because that's about language. It was, did it pull me in, and did it make me feel something? Was I engaged? And I realized that what engages us, what we are actually responding to when we're pulled into any story, whether it's in the news or in a movie or a novel or a politician, has to do with something that is internal and something that is not only not taught, but often eschewed in the writing world. And I began to notice it over and over and over, like in everything I read, that, oh my God, what I was taught was completely wrong. And what actually grabbed us was something totally different. And that's when I sort of decided to write my first book. I was teaching at UCLA in the writers program. And luckily for me, at that time, neuroscience was just, it was exploding everywhere. And I realized that what I thought was my theory about what was pulling us in was actually hard science, was actually neuroscience, was actually what we are wired to respond to, why we're wired to respond to stories being the world's first virtual reality. So I was super lucky in that. And that's what pulled me in. And then I wrote Wired for Story, and then another book called Story Genius that's basically for writers if you want to start, like, where do you begin and how do you go forward? And then, of course, Story or Die. But that's how I got pulled into it. And it felt really good. I have a big mouth, as you could probably tell.
Yeah.
And I kind of loved that. It was like, this is the opposite of what you guys are teaching. Like, you're just so wrong. It made me so angry, because I would see so many writers who really wrote beautifully and were utterly boring, and were being pulled away, being given advice that was 160 or 80 or whatever that half is degrees wrong from what's actually right. And the same thing is true of copywriting, or of any kind of nonfiction writing or speech writing, is that there's so much you need to know, and what pulls us in is the opposite of what we've been taught, sadly.
Well, maybe let's, since you mentioned that, maybe let's start with, like, what's one of the biggest, like, misconceptions or things that they're teaching wrong?
Okay, and that's very easy. Yeah, the biggest thing they're teaching wrong is that it's about the plot. It's about the things that happen. Story is not about what happens. And that in story, you want to use backstory sparingly, and then only when the reader needs to know something, which is completely untrue on both counts. You never put anything in because either your listener or your reader needs to know it. It's there because it's something that your protagonist is struggling with in the moment, on the page or on the screen or in the script, or that we can feel, that we can understand, that we understand the why. Because the thing about our brains is, and this is how, again, we're wired, which is the brain is a prediction machine. We are wired to record past memories in order to predict the future. Meaning, for all of us, for you, me, for everybody, comes from one place and one place only. And that is what our past experience has taught us that those things mean. There's no meaning intrinsic in a thing out there, no objective meaning. It's all subjective, coming from, again, what our past experience has taught us. And that's what drives fiction forward. It's what drives any story forward. It's not about what, it's about why. And the why always comes from the past, always.
And that's
got to be meaning there.
Right, that's where meaning comes from. That's where emotion comes from. The biggest lie the world tells us is this notion that for the past 2,000 years, thank you, Plato, very much, bless his heart, which I mean in the complete Southern sense of the expression, bless his heart, is that there's logic and reason and there's emotion, and the goal of emotion is to subvert reason. And so we don't want to pay attention to it. It's some vague thing out there that's basically there to lead us astray and to make a wrong choice. And that is completely untrue. It's both and emotion is always the decider, because what emotion actually is emotion. It telegraphs, it transmits meaning. Emotion lets us know what things mean to us. That is what it is. Every choice you make, you can sit down and think about it. You don't make a choice based on your rational analysis of the situation. You make a choice based on how the rational analysis makes you feel. If you couldn't feel and process emotions, you couldn't make a single rational decision. And that's not hyperbole. That's science.
It's true.
That's hard
We
science.
always talk about in persuasion that people make, they typically make decisions, whether it's a buying decision or a decision to do something. It's all based on emotion, but they'll come back and justify it with logic. But the
Right.
thing that moved them was emotion in the first place.
But even that logic is a lot of times illogical, because what you're pointing to, Lisa, is it's based on their specific past experiences that have all kinds of filters and emotions involved and all that kind of stuff. So it's not actually logic that they're that we're using.
There's no such thing as external logic in that way. I mean, in a story, all logic is subjective logic, but it is the subjective logic of the protagonist. Any story's through line isn't the plot. It's never about the stuff that happens, because, you know, we live out here in the world. We see what happens. We get that. We want to know why it happens. And the through line is actually the evolving internal subjective narrative that your protagonist, main character, you, if you're telling a story, is using to make sense of things. That's what we come for. That's what we resonate with. I mean, stories are the world's first virtual reality. I mean, it's how we get to experience things that if we actually experience them, we might not make it to tomorrow, or things that would be great if we experienced, but we're too afraid to. So we want to know, what would it really be like? And it takes through all the layers of that, which is why AI can never write good fiction ever. It's top down, stories bottom up.
Right. And I keep hearing the word, like I hear you say meaning, like there's meaning attached to it. And what I'm hearing you say is it's what matters to the protagonist 100%. And the characters in the thing.
It's what matters and why.
Yeah. So that's what the emotion is pointing to. Oh, because we can see 15 different things or 1,000 different things during a day. Some of those trigger emotions, some of those don't. And the emotion is there to tell us there's something here that might matter, like in a different, at a different level than everything else you saw today. Right.
100%.
Yeah. And keying into those emotions is what, and being able to do that skillfully, I guess, is what makes good story. Is that?
Well, yeah, it's knowing where they came from. It's knowing the why a person would feel that way about something. You know, I mean, for instance, you know, if you were bitten by a dog when you were really, really young, every time a dog barks, you might get really scared. They go, "What's wrong with you? That's just that's a chihuahua. Why are you afraid?" But it's because what your brain has put together is that barking immediately triggers that fear of what happened to you when you were little. That's the why. Again, it's a very simplistic answer. And we're always affected by that. Nobody ever makes a choice based on one thing. Nobody ever feels only one thing about it. It's layers. I heard someone say the other day, it's like every choice that we make is actually a series of trade-offs. And that's so true. Good fiction, good stories understands the weight of those trade-offs. And they're not trade-offs that are linear, first this, then that, then that. It's simultaneous. It's all that's where story lives and breathes, and what we go through to make up our minds to do whatever the tough choice the story is forcing us to make. And usually we want, as is the keystone of capitalism, to get the most and give up the least. And giving up the least means being the least vulnerable, because that's what we're the most afraid of. I think the biggest mistake that people often make, of the many of them, when they're trying to convince anyone of anything, is that they're afraid to be vulnerable. They're afraid to show that they made a mistake or there was something they didn't know. And the only way we can connect with other people in literature or in life, the truest thing they ever said in college, is by being vulnerable. Vulnerability is the key, and it's the key to likability.
Yeah, because we like a protagonist in any story that has flaws, has an internal struggle of some sort, is dealing with something that we can relate to, right? I mean, he's like, you know,
exactly.
I know exactly what he's going through.
Because you've been there. Because that's what we don't tell people. I always say to writers, like, think about like what you do, that you would die if anyone else knew. Like if anyone else found it out, you'd be like, oh my God, like I'm under the bed. It's like, that's where story lives and breathes. I had a student at UCLA who once said, she said, I know on the surface, I look really put together. And she did. She looked so put together that didn't even sound snotty. She said, I know on the surface I look really put together, but inside I'm a raging mess. and I'm trying to keep all of you from seeing it.
Yeah.
Stories about the raging mess, always.
I mean, just the way you said that and her words there, like I immediately feel for her and like understand, where she's coming from. And I can just feel that, like when she's home alone in her room, just like finally sighing relief that she doesn't have to hold it all together. Like there's just so much that unpacks in that one little statement.
Yeah, I was very grateful to her for saying that, because I've quoted her for years.
Yeah, you should send her some royalties.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But it goes to that lie that they tell us to tell from kids: never let them see you sweat. Stories
Ugh.
about sweating, stories about what it costs. Because business leaders will get up and they'll give their accomplishments like it was easy, like it was no big deal, and it makes people not like you.
No one wants to hear that. Like,
not
it was an easy ride to the top. First of all, that's bullshit. And then second of all, it's. I mean, you're not being honest when you say that. But yeah, no one likes someone who is just arrogant like that.
Yeah, exactly. But they're afraid. I mean, and the reason they do it, ironically, is because they're afraid of being vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what story's about. Story's about, to put it in a nutshell, it's about how somebody deals with a problem they can't avoid, and something in their belief system has to shift in order for them to solve it.
Yeah.
Or it is something very different, or often both.
Yep.
That's what a story is, and that's what we come to story for. And that's why it's all internal. Your protagonist's brain is the command center of the novel or of the story, even if you're telling a story, because all of the, as you were saying, meaning, and you're right, all the meaning is what matters to somebody, comes from the meaning they're reading into what's happening, not some quote unquote objective meaning, because there isn't any.
Sean and I laugh all the time about, because we attribute going back to like superheroes from the beginning. No one likes Superman. I mean, because he's just perfect, right? I mean, although I think that people like the Christopher Reeve Superman, because there was like a part of him, like as Clark Kent, that was really goofy and people could relate to, kind of a struggling person out there, guy that didn't have it all together, but he had, and it was like an alter ego type thing. But Superman is like too perfect, right?
Well, even in Marvel, I mean, Captain America, he gets made fun of by all the other.
That's right.
All the other Avengers, because he's too goody two shoes. He's too perfect. He doesn't get angry most of the time. Like, so it's just not relatable.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing we can learn from it. We come to every story asking, what am I going to learn here that's going to help me make it through the night? We come to all stories looking for that. And if we can't feel what that might be from the very beginning, all stories make a point beginning from the very first sentence, we're not going to go forward with you at all, because we're going to go, okay, good for you. You have a perfect life. You got that done easily. Not only is that going to teach me anything, now I feel bad about myself. I can't do that. So you've like lost on both counts.
So in a way, every fiction book is also a self-help book.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we come to story for. That's why we're wired for story. I mean, we're wired for story from long before, like I said, long before there was even written language. I mean, we get pulled into a story, and think about it. Like when you get pulled into a story, like if you're watching a movie or reading a novel, and that feeling like you're really tired, you got a big meeting the next day, got to get up, you're going one more page, and then you keep reading, and then suddenly like the sun's coming up. I mean, you are out of reality. We're pulled out of reality. We're 360 degrees into this other world, which means that when you think back in the day, if you could get pulled out of our world, somebody could have come and clobbered you and thrown you off a cliff. In other words, there's an evolutionary purpose to story. Brian Boyd writes this in his book. I can't remember the title of it now because I read it a long time ago. But it is about the reason that we can get pulled into a story is because, like I said, it is the world's first virtual reality. You can experience something that you haven't yet experienced. And let's face it, how often when you think about something, what it might be like and what it's actually like, how often are those two things the same? I mean, really often not. So you learn what that would be. If it didn't serve an evolutionary purpose, we wouldn't be talking about story right now, because there wouldn't be any such thing. It is evolutionary. We come to it going, what is it really like? What it's like, as I'm fond of saying, everybody knew this movie before, but not Citizen Kane used to be thought of as the best movie of all time. The newsreel producer in the beginning, they're sending them out to find out what rosebud means. And he said, nothing's ever more interesting than finding out what somebody thinks, how they see the world. And it's so true. That's what we're there for, because we see what you do. I want to know why.
Yeah.
Because why is going to keep me safe. I mean, that's to say really quickly, the metric that we all use to make sense of everything is, how will that thing out there affect me specifically? Boots on the ground, meaning in my life, in something that is going to affect me that I can see. Is it going to help me, or is it going to hurt me? Is it going to keep me safe or not? Is it going to get me closer to my agenda, achieving my agenda, which is what happens in fiction, or not? And the problem that we have is that that means that that person, especially if you're trying to convince someone of something, has to be able to unpack it. They have to understand what you mean by the conceptual things that you say. It's Chip and Dan Heath from Made to Stick.
Oh yeah.
It's like the curse of knowledge. It's like, once you know something, it's nigh on impossible to put yourself into the mindset of someone who doesn't. So you start using jargon or lingo, and other people are going, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
The minute you want to explain something to somebody, they're not paying attention anymore, or they're angry because you're explaining it to them, because you're implying that they don't understand it. And now you just call them dumb, and now they're call you dumb over something. I mean, yeah, it does not work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, let's talk a little bit about the science. We've kind of talked conceptually about story, and we've hinted that there's hard science, and I'm curious like how you unpack that, and then what that, and then I want to get into some examples of those first sentences maybe that really
the hook. What hooks people. Yeah.
Like, and what's the I just had an image of 10th grade English, like diagramming sentences. If we did that with story, like what would that look like?
Sure.
So let's start with wherever you want to start, hard science or kind of examples.
Well, I mean, hard science in the sense of, I'm not sure which you mean. I mean, again, we're wired for story. Like I said, we make sense of everything through story. Story being what I just said. How is that going to affect me specifically, given what my agenda is? So we take everything and we put it into that context. That is the context by which we are going to read meaning into everything that happens. So if you want something to happen, and again, it would be all of the different layers of your life. Something happens. How will that affect me? Will it help me get the promotion I want? Is it going to make me have to move now? But my kid really loves the school that they're in and they don't want to move. My mom would be proud of me if I took that job. I mean, we take everything and put it into the context of, I know Brene Brown talks about the story that we tell ourselves, and I like her a lot. But the only problem I have with that is, if you say the story that we tell ourselves, it implies it's a choice, right? It implies we know we are telling ourselves a story, and we don't. That is the way the brain works. It's got that context and everything comes in, and we plug it into, as we were saying before, the meaning and how is it going to affect us given what our agenda is. And that's the science. I mean, we can talk about the science of, which I think is really interesting, and you can stop me at any point if this feels irrelevant, but we're wired to live in a world we don't live in anymore. And that's why backstory is so important. We're wired to live in a world that existed about 75,000 years ago, when our brain had that last big growth spurt. And for a long time, scientists thought that was when, and it was when we got the ability to kind of think rationally, right? To look at rational things. But what they realize now is the bigger reason for it was because that was when nature, our biology, realized that if we were going to do like what we've since done, which is, for better or worse, take over the world, we needed to learn to do that thing that they've taught us to do since kindergarten, which is to work well with others. And so what was also wired in was the need to belong to a group. We are all biologically wired. We need to belong to a group as much as we need food, air, and water. But the problem is, here's where what started out a feature turned into a bug 75,000 years ago. So basically, if you were born 75,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago, the world you're born into is going to be the same, right? I mean, it's like there's no religions, there's no nations, there's no streets, roads. It's just basically the same. And you were probably going to be with the same group of people for your entire life. It's like Dunbar's number, Robin Dunbar, the evolutionary psychologist, biologist out of Oxford. It's 150, right? We are still wired to, at best, be able to keep track of tangentially 150 people. It's like if you meet, someone is 151st person, you got to ghost somebody else to bring them in and be able to remember them. But so the way the brain works was it made sense at that point too, since nothing was going to change. And the people that are the people you're born into, that what you learn as a child gets encoded as permanent. It's not, that's the way my world is, or my family is, or my religion, or my nation. It's, that is the way the world is.
Yeah.
It becomes like permanently encoded. And it was a feature then. It made total sense that you wouldn't have to relearn everything. If suddenly you go, oh yeah, wait, that person is in my tribe. Okay, good. You already knew it. Yeah. Now, obviously, since, what we learned as children might very well not be true, or there might be some other way of looking at it, we still tend to think of it as, if you're not like me, there's something wrong with you. Hope you get a lot of therapy and join me over here in Real Reality real soon. That's why what's happened in our past, or the protagonist's past, is where all meaning and mattering comes from. And that's the meaning that we're going to be reading into what happens to us, until life, hopefully at some point, with some things, disabuses us of things that we learned or that we thought we learned as kids. Because as kids, we come in and kid logic is so much more raw and honest and real than adult logic, because we're trying to figure out what we need to do, not to sound completely transactional, but to get our needs met. So once we've learned that as kids, we have what I like to call, we end up with misbeliefs, meaning something that we think we need to do to get our needs met, but that actually we've either misread it or was true in the moment and not true going forward. And we've all got them. I mean, that's what a story really is about. The thing that shifts in somebody's belief system in a story is usually that misbelief that they think has been helping them. We know in the end it's a misbelief, but we think it's 100% not only true, but lucky that we learned it early in life. Like the nicer someone is to you, the more they're actually doing that to be able to manipulate you. So you want to be wary of people who really seem like they want to get to know the real you. Total disbelief, and you can see how that could lead someone astray throughout their entire life. Anyway, so that's where story lives and breathes, is in how do we then take reality, plot, that forces somebody to overcome that misbelief, see that it's been holding them back, so they can either achieve their agenda or realize their agenda wasn't really what they wanted.
This brings up an interesting thought for me. So a couple things there. One, that's a great distinction, like between a truth that you might believe as a kid because of a certain situation, so you interpret it, as opposed to a truth that is just more general and could be the opposite of that, could be the same in some cases. But yeah, we really latch onto situational truths when we're young, as opposed to whatever the other word would be. I don't know. I can't think of what a different word might be. The other thing that keeps coming to mind as you're talking, Lisa, is like, and I'm curious as someone who teaches story, especially as a copywriter, is always told to write to one person. And as you're talking, I can't help but thinking, well, like nobody has the same story. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to tell a story into their story and bring them along, but everybody's got it. Now I know there's some similarities and things like that, but everybody's going to interpret the story I'm trying to tell slightly differently. They're going to see different things in their mind's eye. I mean, how do you deal with that when you're working with students and authors and things like that? Or do you even worry about it?
Oh, I mean, well, when you're writing fiction, that doesn't apply, because you're going into one person. So it's like, I would always say, before all stories begin and medias res, meaning, in the middle of the thing, meaning the first page or the first word of any story you're telling is the first page or word of the second half of the story. So you need to dive into
the dead body, all that stuff, right?
The things that push them into that dark and stormy night that they have no idea waiting for them, but you are ready to have it pounce. But but you got to do the first half, which gets you to the why. And I tell writers to go back to where did that misbelief come from? What happened? And to write it in the first person as it's happening. So you're in the person's head and you're watching, as we all do, when something happens to us, like you were saying before, that has a consequence, that has an effect. After that, we immediately draw a conclusion that plays forward, meaning something that we have now realized about the world. But to talk more about copywriting, right? And going into, you're right, when you're writing copy to try to convince a group of people, because you're rarely writing copy to try to convince one person.
Yeah.
It is more looking at what that group believes and going down to the specific why they believe it. And I mean, with that, it's when you're writing for anybody, you do have to know not just what they believe, but why they believe it, where it came from. And you need to, I hate using the word honor. I don't even mean that, but you can't make fun of it. It's really easy when you see somebody, especially these days, like you go, how can you possibly believe that? Like what? You can't do that. You got to go, but why? In other words, you have to empathize with the why behind it and what it would cost them to give that up. Because often what it costs them would be to be ostracized from their, again, we're wired to need to belong to a group or a tribe, to be ostracized from their tribe. And they don't want to. I mean, interestingly, again, going to brain science a bit, because your brain is trying to protect not just your physical sense of you, but your, until your, I guess, I'm trying to think of what word, your sense of who you are. So if you suddenly are kicked out of that, I mean, it's called social homeostasis, which means that not just, I mean, homeostasis is any kind of a biological creature. And if it's got the right temperature, the right food, it's safe. It doesn't just want to stay in balance, but in that particular balance. And social homeostasis is the same. Interestingly, to get ostracized travels the same neural pathways as physical pain does. It's why when they say, your heart is broken, you can feel that you have a heart attack from a broken heart, because the two things travel the exact same neural pathways. It feels so deep. It's terrifying to do something that might get you ostracized. So you really have to, unless you really want them to, and take the whole thing down.
Yeah.
If you pull on one thread of a belief system, the whole thing might fall apart. So you need to find the place in where there's something where what you're offering might offer them something that they want, and they don't even realize it yet, that it hasn't yet been filled. What need do they have that isn't there, but that isn't going to villainize what they believed before, or their tribe or group. Often, sometimes if that is what you want, and then they can make the change and they realize it and they can take it to their group, which is what everybody wants, right? You want someone who's a stan, right? They're going to go and they're going to convince everybody else to do what you want them to. And that's going to give them cred. They're going to feel good about it. But you can't do it by telling them that they're wrong, or coming in and telling them that they're making a mistake. God forbid.
Yeah. I'm having an image right now in my head of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first one where Indiana's it basically is the opening scene, I think, if I remember correctly, where he's got the sandbag and the statue and he's about to switch them out, right? It feels like, that's kind of what we're trying to do. Like we're trying to disrupt something without disrupting it in a way, because it's got to, if it's too jarring, people are just going to shut down.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Well, I think the biggest truth out there is nobody listens until they feel heard. And if you don't make them feel like you understand not just what they believe, but why they believe it, and you're not going to villainize them, then they will listen to you. I think it's why they say often the biggest, people going in trying to change someone's mind are people who were part of their, for again, lack of a better word, tribe to begin with, and have realized that it isn't actually serving the purpose that people thought it would, and now are able to go in because they completely come into, I believe the same thing you did. I was right there. I was with you. But now, because of this, I've realized that maybe there's another way, or maybe that way wasn't really working, or maybe we've been fooled and had, who knows? But
you said just a minute ago, you said, what does it cost? You asked the question, what does it cost someone to give up a current belief?
Yeah.
I wrote that down because I don't think, I know for myself, as a copywriter, I don't consider that enough when I'm trying to
Mhm.
I'm in convincing mode, or
Right.
even I'm being empathetic. I don't think I really do a good job of asking that question and having that level of empathy. So
Well,
I
and
think
a
that's
lot
a really good reminder to ask that question. Like, what?
yeah, I'm
That's
sorry,
a lot to ask of a person.
yeah, there are layers to it. Even if it's the
Hmm.
simplest thing, if it's like, no, I want you to go and volunteer at this place on Saturdays. And if it's a person, no, you don't understand. I work all week, and Saturday's the only day I have to relax. And then I can call my grandma back home, and I don't know how much longer she's got. And that's the one time I can do it. So if you're asking me to give that up, to come and do something else, you have to understand what that cost is. And it's very easy to ask somebody to do something without realizing that by definition, because we all fill up our 24 hours every day, right? By definition, we do that. That you're asking them to not plug something into an empty space, but to take what was in that space and give it up and
Yeah.
do what you want them to
Place it.
do. And that's a lot,
Yeah.
especially these days.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. Jonathan, I'm curious, like, what questions you had since you've read the book, and I'm just
Yeah. So
winging it here.
yeah, I mean, like Wired for Story, you're talking fiction. So what are some other, I think we talked about like the protagonist or the main character that they should have, obviously they should have flaws. They should be relatable. What are some other aspects of a character regarding, I guess, their journey from beginning to end that writers need to understand, or where do writers, so many writers that you work with,
Mhm.
fiction writers, where do they fall short when it comes to character development?
Oh, I think they fall short because they literally don't have a character when they step onto the page.
Mm,
Because, as I said, backstory is the most important layer of story. All story logic comes from your protagonist's story specific backstory, not in general. Like, God forbid they would go and do like a birth to death, or birth to when the story starts bio, because it's, again, very, very shallow. It's just this happened and that happened and that happened. It's about the why, and it's doing that work first, because then we understand, because we're in the character's head, why they want what they want, where they're making that mistake. Because I would never use the word, I know I did, there are a couple of things I would change in Wired for Story. I would never use the word flaw again, because flaw, I think the biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes we've done as humans, is to think there is such a thing as perfect. That is our
right.
biggest mistake.
Sure.
There's no such thing as perfect, because there's so many layers. And if they say, the only constant is change, well, how could you have perfect then? Because it means whatever's perfect now is not going to be perfect in 5 minutes. And on top of that, you're always weighing all of the different layers of what the consequences of any choice you're going to make. So it's really going back and creating, again, stories specifically from, as I like to say, the inception of the misbeliefs, and we've all got them. I have worked with so many writers who've said, I was looking for my protagonist's misbelief, and I found my own. It's like we've all got them. With protagonists, it's one, they tend to come in within the ages of, say, 7 and 13. We pick up supporting misbeliefs after that. But again, that is when, as we were saying before, we're trying to make sense of the world. What do I need to do to get my needs met? And it's life or death when you're a little kid. I mean, as an adult, if somebody does something to screw you over, you can just go, okay, forget it. I'll make other friends, or I'll get another job. As a little kid, if you come home and like your parents have moved and not left a forwarding address, you're kind of screwed. So
Yeah.
you're really trying to figure out, what do I need to do? What matters and what doesn't? And that's coming in, but creating it isn't talking about it. I say to writers all the time these days, beware of simple declarative sentences. It's really easy to go, well, they're very insecure because their parents never looked at their homework. And it's like, I don't know what that means. How did they want it? What happened? Give me that moment where we're in somebody's head as they're going from, often misbeliefs come up when one is in a situation where one feels mortified, like death, that thing where you really think what you've done is good, and you're about to find out that not only isn't it good, but you just undid the thing that you thought you were getting. And that horrible feeling, and then the conclusion that you draw at that point that would play forward, that's what you're looking for. And then you're looking for how that has then affected your protagonist, that person whose head we're going to begin as they're trying to go after that thing they want, because all characters enter the page with, at page one, with something they want and have wanted for a very long time, and a misbelief that's held them back, that by that time has grown, escalated, complicated, and that's now the plot is going to force them to go after what they wanted, but to get it, that misbelief, which they think is helping them, has actually been holding them back, and that's what they end up seeing. As my son is he's a filmmaker, and at one point he was saying that they were bringing a writer in to give more backstory in a movie they were making, and he said, yeah, it's because the story present makes the unconscious conscious. And he didn't mean it in any like a Freudian, Jungian, or God forbid, woo-woo sort of way. He meant literally, this is how we see the world. We haven't questioned it. And now what's happening is forcing that to the surface because it isn't working. And, scene by scene by scene by scene, that's kind of what drives it. That's where the urgency is that inner struggle that keeps us going, whether you're watching a movie, reading a novel, or if you're listening to, your CEO make a speech. It's that inner, oh my God, how are they going to figure this out? Oh God, they're looking at it wrong. What are they going to do? But it's never a flaw. A flaw is so, let's face it, it's very edgy. It's very, oh my God, you're flawed. And it isn't, not a choice. It's your life has taught you to do the stuff that you're doing.
I've noticed a pattern in, movies, TV shows, like when it comes to backstory, that I don't know when this shifted, but it seems like, I don't think it's been super recent, but where backstory is inserted, like it's always like a flashback nowadays. If you watch any movie or if you watch, any show, it's typically, they don't start with the backstory. They like flashback. Has that been something recent? And does that also work in fiction writing too, where most good writing right now is like, hey, you got to start right away and then you build the backstory in as you go?
Okay, well, here's how it works. First, let's talk about fiction first. And yes, you're absolutely right about the other. I have noticed that too, that I would say for the past 10, maybe 15 years, they do either they'll show something, they'll go 6 weeks earlier, or they show the characters thinking and you literally see what, you see a scene of what they're thinking. In fiction, backstory is laced into every page. The problem is the writing world is taught to look at it 100% wrong, which is, you put it in when the reader needs to know something, or you get a whole, entire flashback scene. Backstory is always there in a novel or in fiction in the same way it is here IRL, which is you are trying to figure out what to do because, like you said, it might be a situation where something big is happening and the character's got to figure out, what do I do and what's actually going on? If that was you in that moment, you would be turning to your past to try to figure out, what does this person want? Why do they want it? If I give them that, will that be okay? Will it not be okay?
Yeah.
It comes in service of what's happening. That's how flashbacks, that's how, whether it's an entire flashback, whether it's a sentence or two, whether it's a paragraph, whether it's a word or two, it is always there on every page as the character tries to figure out what the hell is going on and how can I, again, get the most and give up the least. I don't want to be vulnerable. What does this person want? It's always there. The problem with the way writers are taught is they're taught, they would call it, don't give us an info dump. And you definitely don't want to go, okay, time out. Here's what you need to know to understand. I think when you're writing fiction, you should never think about the reader ever. You're in that character's head. The difference between real life and a character on the page is, in real life, like if something was happening to you and you had to turn to the past, you wouldn't sit down and, narrate like, oh my God, that person wants something. It reminds me of the thing that happened at prom when I was 18. And you wouldn't sit down and narrate to yourself what happened, because you would see it, in a flash, maybe even a piece of it. And it would be, I always think of them as holograms that you'd sort of see a bit of, and then it would all be there. Obviously, if you're writing fiction, if it's on, page, you have to write out what that was. That's the art of writing, and giving us those layers, not just one thing. Nobody, like I said, ever makes a decision for one thing. I was working with a writer, and she said, I want to see that, because one of the other things the writing world will say is, don't tell us what the character's thinking. That's for the reader to figure out. And I always think, are you kidding me? You think that seeing what someone does and then you know why and what they're thinking? In real life, that would mean you could read everybody's mind. Good luck with it. But the other thing is that, so she said, I want to see this, working with a writer. She said, I want to see if what you're telling me is true. Like, is it really on every page? And is it really this internality? And she came back 2 weeks later and she said, I started to read Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl, her first book, which is called Sharp Objects. And she said, I'm halfway through and I've highlighted 60, that's 60% of it was backstory. I said it to next, I say it to everybody actually. So don't be surprised I said it to you. I say it to everybody, even standing in line at Trader Joe's, I tell the guy behind me. But I said it to another writer recently, and he was writing a dystopian fantasy. And he came back 2 weeks later and he said, oh my God, I just reread the first Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And you're right, 50 to 60% of it was backstory. It's backstory. And you got to write it first because you got to know what happened to somebody that made them who they are. Again, it comes onto the page and it's story specific. You're not doing it general bio, but specifically given what's going to happen. You can't invent it halfway through because it was true from before the character stepped onto the page, right? So It would have affected their life then. You can't suddenly decide that, oh my God, when they were 10, their entire family was taken out by a meteor that fell on downtown Cleveland because, oh my God, they would have been a totally different person from that moment on. That's what comes first. As I say to writers all the time, that is not pre-writing. It's not research. It's not what you do before you do real writing. That is writing. That is where the story comes from. Because it's not about writing. I would say it's like a Zen koan, or however you say that word. Writing isn't about writing. It's about having the layered something to say. The story polishes the prose, not the other way around. It's not about the plot. It's about how the plot changes the protagonist. Very different.
Can you give an example of, like, I'm putting you on the spot here, I know, so if not, that's fine. But I can be one of your overeager students, I guess. Like, I think people underestimate how much backstory you can fit into like a sentence or half a sentence. I think that's where people tend to want to overwrite or whatever. So can you think of a one-liner that kind of reveals a character, or even just make one up that I'll let you answer that first. And I have something that's in my head, but I'm not sure where I heard it from.
I mean, I'll give you the sentences that I think are really good opening sentences that pull us in. I couldn't make up one on the spot. I would start to dither. But that pull us in, for instance, and I'll give you 3 of them, or 4 actually, because they're all short. I mean, one that I actually came across it. I'll tell you the story first, but God, I think it was in 2008. Stanley Fish wrote, and I don't know what I would call it an editorial, but it was in the New York Times, and it was about how he was in an airport, and he realized he had no book to read. He was about to go on a long flight. So he said, I'm going to go into the bookstore, and I'm going to buy a mystery, because he loved mysteries, based on the first sentence. So he analyzes 3 first sentences and then says, and this is the book, this is what I picked. It doesn't say the name of the book. So years later, I was in a bookstore, and I pulled it out, and I went, oh my God, that was the book. And the first, and it was a great book. I really liked it. It was a book by Elizabeth George, who I'd never read or didn't know anything of her then. And the first sentence was, Joel Campbell, age 11 at the time, began his descent toward murder with a bus ride. And immediately I was put out. Here's the interesting thing. That became the yardstick for the whole novel, because the novel was very long. It was, I think, 732 pages. Murder in Question doesn't happen until page 600. It is never mentioned again. If you redacted that first sentence, I don't think you'd read the book. Because, and you love Joel. That's the thing. He's this kid. He's a mixed race kid in inner city London. Everything he does to make things better only makes it worse. You love him. I mean, you're actually hoping that she did something that a writer should never do, which is lie to your reader, that maybe he isn't really going to, anyway. But that's one that pulled us in. Let's see, another would be the opening of, and it's a YA called Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, and it opens with, and I'm probably going to mangle it a bit, but it was a weirdly subtle conversation. I almost didn't realize I was being blackmailed, but it goes into, in that beginning, what happened, why, what the blackmail was. It wasn't a general thing like he wants my lunch money. I think he was 16 in the book. It had to do with all of the layers of what this other kid wanted of his. A great book, I think, for examples is Celeste Ng's first book, which is called Everything I Never Told You. And it opens with Lydia is dead, but they don't know this yet. And we immediately get pulled into such a good book. I love that.
That's intriguing.
Yeah, it's real. It has what I call origin scenes for many of the characters. And it's not a mystery. It's not. So we find out what happened to her by the end of the first chapter. And anyway, but those are sentences that pull us in. I think a master at writing a paragraph or two, and you feel like you know the entire character, and I wouldn't even try to make one up. Although I think sometimes his books are, is Stephen King. He is so good at that.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen King can write a paragraph, and you feel like that's my next door neighbor who I lived next door to for my whole entire life. But even with that, because he's a natural. I mean, some people are natural writers. It's like, they could write a laundry list and you'd be, sobbing over the plight of poorly sorted socks. They've just got the thing. But sometimes, I mean, and I don't mean this as a joke, but it sounds like it. I tried to read his book Insomnia so many times, but every time it put me to sleep, I just couldn't do it. Like Ralph in his green shoes.
Ironic.
What's the point? But but all those.
The movie was pretty bad too.
Yeah, I totally believe. Yeah, I don't know where it went. I mean, I read a lot of it. It's like, I don't know where this is going, so I don't. I'm just, I stopped. But some of his books, I loved. I loved Under the.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic.
Billy Summers.
Most of his older stuff, I think, is much better. Yeah.
He's so good. He's got that thing. He's got that thing. Clearly, he was born with it.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing for writers because it is layered. It's like everything happens simultaneously. There's so much you have to have, and it's never about writing. I always say, don't use $25 words. Don't use $5 words.
So let's see if we can put this. Let's see if we can put this in perspective for the average listener here. Who's probably not a fiction writer. We probably have a lot more nonfiction readers and writers and copywriters and salespeople and that kind of stuff that listen. When you teach this stuff, you gave us 3 examples of great opening sentences.
Mm-hmm.
How much writing has to happen to create that one sentence or research or whatever? Like how much, like,
if you're trying to convince somebody of something, a lot.
No, I mean, just even like that, like it doesn't just, I guess for some people, it might just, you get that, the muse strikes and you get the first sentence and it's just like, where did that come from? I don't know if that happens or not. But yeah, how much, I guess, time and effort goes into a sentence like that?
A lot. A lot. I mean, what do they say? There's no writing. There's only rewriting. I mean, a lot, because first you have to know all of that. I mean, the biggest mistake that writers make, and I see it happen all the time, no matter what you're doing, is that if they can't get a perfect first sentence, they don't go forward. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. And this goes back to that way that your brain is trying to help you and it's not, which is like, I suppose with copywriting, it's the same, or with novelists, it's like they'll write a first page and they'll go, your brain's going, oh my God, this is nothing like all those first pages of those books you love. Like, oh my God, if you show this to somebody, they're going to laugh at you. You're going to be mortified. Like, no, put that away. Don't even let anybody know you're trying to do it. I want to keep you safe. And I always say to writers, like, take that voice, duct tape it to a chair, gag it, turn it to the wall and say, I know you're trying to help me. Please shut up and go forward. Because it's just, I say to writers all the time, and I think this is true of copywriting too, spill it onto the page. Just whatever it is you're thinking, let it come out, and then you can go. But you have to have asked these questions first. Same thing with copywriting. If you don't know who your target audience is, why they believe what they believe, what would really matter to them, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And you got to be willing to be vulnerable. You got to be willing to be vulnerable. You got to be willing to be vulnerable and to say what people are thinking. I mean, yeah.
You got to be interesting. If no one, I mean, it's got to hook people. People's attention right now is, I mean, it's a premium. Like, to get people to tune in and to read an entire book from cover to cover, you got to you got to hook them.
Well, that's exactly right. And when you do, then they can't put it down. I mean, you got to get it so that you've connected into, but it's got to matter to them. That is the other big mistake I think that copywriters and advertisers can make is mistaking why something matters to them, and that therefore it'll matter to somebody else. And it's like, no, it doesn't. We don't care how you feel about it. We don't care about you at all when you're a copywriter. We don't care. We just care about us. And how is this going to, and do you get us? If you don't get us, we don't trust you, and we don't care. But people often will highlight the reasons that it's important to them and not realize that not only is it probably not important to somebody else for the same reasons, but you're alienating them now.
Yeah.
So let me ask this, then we'll start wrapping up here. Man, that hour has flown by. In the sentence about the kid who ends up murdering, so like, it's a great sentence. It hooks me. Why does it hook me in so many people? Like, if we're thinking about why does that matter to me, the reader, like, why does that, like, really, why is it like I have this secret fear that I could end up doing that? Like, what's going on there that hooks so many people?
I think with that is because we just want to know. Because we want to understand what makes people tick. So we want to know, okay, I mean, partly because we've read a book before, we go, oh, this is going to be intriguing. But because we immediately like Joel and we see he's doing good stuff, the question, not that we're thinking this consciously, but is why, again, does this bus ride? Why would something that seems so utterly benign and positive going to end up causing somebody to do something so incredibly horrific, meaning to murder someone? And then she's just good because it goes all the way through where we're caring about this kid, and he's constantly coming up against stuff that is, unfair to him, and yet, he's got to survive it.
And I guess, from a very subconscious level and super fast, connecting the dots, there's probably a part of us that like would need to know what that person looks like, what a person's capable of, so that we can be safe. Like we said earlier, be in the tribe, right? Like you're looking for character clues. Well, if a guy can just end up at murder just from taking a bus ride, like what else am I missing?
Oh yeah. I mean,
none of this is conscious. It's like,
no,
it's just like, it's just the patterns that we've picked up from being human.
Exactly. Like books are like, there's a book called Perfect Days by a guy named Rafael Montez. And it takes place in this third person, but it's in the mind of a psychopath. And I'll tell you something really interesting about it. It's in the mind of a psychopath. And who doesn't want to know, like, how are they making sense of stuff? Like, how are they justifying? And I don't mean they feel like they've got to justify it, but how are they reading logic into their own version of logic into why what they're doing is the right thing to do? And this character's 20 and he goes to a party, he falls in love with this woman. So he does, what we all do when we fall in love. He finds a way to get into our house, he knocks her out, he rolls her up in a carpet, and then he spends the rest of the, holding her captive. But here's the thing. We care about him so much. I recommended this recently to a writer who's writing someone had said to her, your main character isn't likable enough. No one's going to want to go through the book with her. And I said, oh, they're totally wrong because you take us so deeply inside and she's going to have a change anyway. I said, read this book. You'll see what I mean. Like, nobody likes a psychopath. We're not inviting them over for Thanksgiving. And she came back and she said, oh my God, I totally see what you mean. And I feel really guilty because there were times where he was going to get caught and I didn't want him to because I was empathizing with him. We want to know what makes other people tick because we want to know, what do I need to do to stay safe? We're always ask, what do I need to do to stay safe? And what do I need to do to bring my agenda to fruition? That is always the basic question we are asking with everything. And like,
do you think,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you think there's also a part of us, I know there is for me, when I read some stuff, I'm like, am I capable of that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Can you put yourself in that? Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, could I end up rolling somebody in a carpet? I kind of feel like I could. Like, it's like it's a weird, it's a weird kinsmanship that you have with some of these characters. Like, it's like you can see yourself just enough in them that it's a little scary and a little, and that's one of the reasons you keep reading.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Or you go, I understand why.
Yeah.
I get the why. I get what, because we did, and it does. I mean, they say reading anyway really does enlarge our ability to empathize. and keeps us alive longer as well. I mean, because we go, oh, it's so easy to look at somebody in a group that you decide is like, oh my God, not them. And then you read a novel and you're in their world and you go, oh, wait a minute. Now I understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now I get what that means to them. Yikes.
Yeah.
And so, you feel closer on that level.
It's kind of like one of my all-time favorite shows was Breaking Bad. And so you get hooked into that.
Oh yeah.
And then you actually start to, even as you see this character progress from, just a simple chemistry teacher to a drug kingpin, you're just like, you're starting to get on his side. And then you're like, you've invested so much and you're like, I could see myself getting to that point. And then you're like, but before you know it, you're just totally invested in, and you sympathize with him as, as he's going through this change.
Yeah, 100%. Because you get I thought that series had the best finale, one of the best finales.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ever, because he got what he wanted. I mean, he died happy.
That's right.
And what was the movie with Michael Douglas? Was it Falling Down, where he's in traffic one day and he just loses it?
Yeah.
I mean, that is such relatable. Like,
oh yeah, of course, we can all relate to a situation.
Yeah, I'm that close, man.
Yeah.
On certain days, it's like, I feel you, buddy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But what was
those
like
kind of stories
with the Walter White character? What was interesting about that is his why changed. His why at the beginning was, I need this much money to take care of my family because he's got terminal cancer, or so he thought, but then his why completely changed.
Yeah.
Like his why was just, I want to build an empire.
Yeah.
They actually did a interview with him on this last week's CBS Sunday Morning. They did a whole kind of a recap on that, on Breaking Bad. And he even talked about how he modeled the first half of the show was basically his father as a midlife man, hunched shoulders, didn't do what he wanted to do in life.
Right.
And then as the character progressed, he started putting his shoulders back more. He started standing up taller,
standing up straight.
Like all confidence. He talked about how he intentionally changed the physical appearance and the voice and everything of the character throughout the show. Wow. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of thought into the character, which I guess is why these guys get paid so much, because there's a lot more to it than we think. But you could do the same thing in writing.
Absolutely.
You start to unfold the shoulders are no longer hunched, or however you might say that in different parts of the book.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference between writing prose and and film, which is I did say a bit about this in Wide for Story that I would kind of take out a bit, is that body language gives us so much information on the screen, and tonality. You can convey so much, and you can see everything. You don't have to describe what something looks like, as it's like right there, you're seeing it.
Right.
In prose, body language doesn't do you any good. To conveying what you just said would be in something he'd be thinking in his head that we get it, as opposed to the fact that his shoulders were suddenly back, because that's blunt force.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's much harder. I mean, prose takes us to the one place that no other form of storytelling can, which is we're inside somebody's head. We're inside their head and we're seeing through their eyes the meaning they're making of it. And you can't do that as well in any other form of storytelling.
Yeah.
So you might have a scene in that case where he's looking in the mirror and he starts to see himself differently, and he's thinking whatever, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. But it would be the why. I mean, again, you can't get the why in as much depth. Some actors can do it. I won't go into the long, but if you ever watch the Aziz Ansari, The Master of None, there's a scene when he's in a cab at the end of, and I can't remember what season it was, and he's realizing that the woman who he's had a crush on, he probably is never going to see again. And he's just missed the opportunity to spend a day with her. And it's like a couple minute scene, and there's a song playing in the back. And what he does with his face and his body language, I've never seen a more eloquent, like, oh my God, I can read your mind. And there was a scene also, I think it's the 8th episode of the first season of The Crown, where she's going to be queen, and she's realized that Andrew, whatever her husband was, is going to be a jerk and go off and sleep with other women. And she's going to this photo shoot. and you just watch her walk in and transform her face. I think it was Claire Foy was the actress at the time. Her face just transforms, but you can feel the pain. You can feel what
Yeah.
she's letting go and what it's going to cost her to be, the queen, as opposed to, married to somebody who maybe would have stayed true to her. Oh, well.
Yeah. I heard an actor say one time that, like, if you wanted to cry in a scene or the script calls for it, the key to having a good cry in a scene is to look like you don't want to cry. Because if you just start crying, because nobody wants to cry. Like, they're always trying to hold it back a little bit, right? Or whatever. So I just thought that was a really, and I think you do the same thing in writing. Like, you show the tension of the moment, not.
But think about like what that would mean, though. If you're trying not to, you're giving much more information. It's like we can read your mind more. Like, oh my God, they're gonna, and we know what's going. They're trying to hold it back. They're trying to. If they just started to sob, it would convey a completely different and more like one note thing. So that's really good. Yeah, that's really good.
Well, Jonathan, did you want to poke around the movie real quick or anything?
What's that?
You mentioned the movie at the beginning, Project Hail Mary. Did you have any?
Yeah, I just love one of the things I told my kids, like, because I went to see it with my boys. Well, the whole family went last week, but I told them I love the part. There's a part in that where, and I'm not going to use the word flawed, but there is a, the main protagonist that Ryan Gosling plays. He's like, he's been volunteered for this mission, but all the way up until the very end, as you're watching the backstory, he has no desire whatsoever to partake in something that's going to save humanity. Yeah. So they literally has to get forced into this they drug him and they put him on the ship, right? So you find in what's interesting is you don't find that out until the very end, and you realize, but you appreciate that because all of everything that he has worked through or progressed through, then you appreciate that even more.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of flashbacks throughout. And
it
was like his memory coming back literally is what, part of it, because he was knocked out for the ride,
Right.
So it was really interesting the way they unfolded it and, all these different scenes and stuff. Yeah, it was
the reluctant, what is it? The reluctant hero or the reluctant?
Yeah, I mean, and the interesting, because they did it in the parts of the book I read, they did that. I thought he did a really good job of triggering whatever memories. There were a few, but I like to call it the this versus that. Here's what I thought. Here's what I got. Here's who I was. Here's who I am now. And the story is how we get from one to the other. But that's a perfect this versus that. Here he is here. Wait, that's what he wanted back there. Uh-oh. How do we make sense of that? And I think that's where the tension always is, because if you only had the story of what was happening once he comes to in the spaceship, and you didn't have any of the backstory, you'd go, okay, so what
Exactly.
And it's not about does he or doesn't he save humanity, it's about would he or wouldn't he have done it given the choice, and look, he's doing it now, and what he's realized that this is probably a good idea.
Right.
I guess that was on my bingo card, I just didn't realize it.
And I mean, Batman comes to mind. I mean, without the backstory of him as a kid losing his parents, then Batman doesn't exist.
That changes everything.
Otherwise he's just kind of a creepy guy wearing a mask. I mean,
he's a weird dude, right?
He should be in the psych ward, not fighting crime. So well, we could talk all day about this, Lisa. This has been really fun to talk about. Where can people find more of your work, or
just my website? It's Wired for Story. That is me, Wired FOR Story, and that's where I am. That's me. And
as you mentioned, Story Genius, which I haven't read. Story or Die is a great book too. It's geared more towards persuasive writing, I think.
Story or Die is for the world. It's really it's for if you're a copywriter, if you're doing ads, or if you just want to convince your kid not to text and drive. That's where you want to go.
Yeah. Well, great books, by the way. And again, if you're into fiction writing, if you're writing fiction, I'd recommend all of the books, But Wired for Story is incredible because it really does lay out like what are the elements in a fiction story, not only just the protagonist, but how you lay out the visuals, everything. And it's not about good writing; it's about telling a good story.
And it applies to it applies to screenwriting, it applies to memoir, it applies to any kind of a story, because what pulls us into a story is just for story, regardless of what the goal of that story is.
So I can use this on my wife to convince her to do what I want.
I hate to say, well, that's the whole point. Stories affect us every minute of every day. So sadly, the answer is absolutely.
I'm curious. You probably read a lot of stuff that people submit to you that they're hoping that goes into, gets on the big screen, or, gets made into some kind of show. But, I would say what is the, I guess from a percentage standpoint, like how many of these actually are worth moving in, up the ladder? And say, or do you have to be really brutally honest with most people that you read?
You have to be brutally honest.
Yeah.
Two things. You have to be brutally honest. I can't tell you screenplay wise how many screenplays I've read where I thought, okay, I don't care what I said before. This is the person who's never seen a movie. I mean,
yeah.
And same thing with novels, not quite the same. But the flip side is I actually do believe that zeroing in on what it is that pulls us in and then learning to write that way can make a massive, massive difference. I've seen people who went from between one and another, and I would get new pages and I'd go, I wouldn't say it out loud, but I think you're punking me. Like someone else wrote this for you. There's no way you wrote it. But they did, because they went into the depth that they had been lacking before. So I really do believe that almost anybody can learn to really write a compelling story.
Has anybody submitted AI stuff that like you've read and you're like, this is AI? I can already tell this.
AI can never write compelling fiction ever. But people have done where they've gone, nobody's tried to go, hey, what do you think of this? And as if they wrote it, but they've gone, here's what I did. Here's the AI version of it. And the AI version always sucks. Really sucks.
Yeah.
Because it's top down. AI has no lived experience. And we live in constant chaos because every day, all the decisions we're making, it's also like, well, if I do this, my significant other might be upset. If I do this, I can't walk the dog. If I do this, my mom said this before. And exponential layers. And plus, did I eat something weird last night? Did I get enough sleep? All of those layers we are dealing with all the time. And we just think of it as life. And that's where so many of the decisions they ping on the truest. I will leave you with this on that level. The truest thing about writing and life, I think, was spoken by Tony Soprano in the finale of the 5th season of The Sopranos, in the episode called All Due Respect, where Syl is trying to get him to whack Tony B, doesn't want to. And he says, all due respect, every decision I make affects every fact.
Yeah, I remember that scene.
And it's too much almost. And in the end, you're all alone with it.
You're all alone.
That's what writing a novel is like.
That's right.
Every decision pings off of every other thing. It's always all there. It's not one thing going for every layer is touching every other layer. Always. Truest thing writing.
Yeah.
Plus I love Tony's.
Oh, that show is Breaking Bad and Sopranos have to be my all-time favorite shows ever.
Tony Soprano was not a psychopath. I don't care what anybody says.
He was a human.
No, he was actually very smart. I mean, he was you could analyze that.
He was all of us. That's why it was
exactly.
such a
You could see
show.
that's another one of those, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Lisa, thank you so much. It's been so great. I want to mention once again, wiredforstory.com. You can find out more. We'll have a link on our show page for this episode. And again, thank you so much for helping us unpack all of this today.
You. This was super fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Well, if you would hang tight in the green room, we're going to close. Sean and I are going to close out. Okay. And if you'll hang tight for about 30 seconds, we're going to wrap up real quick, and then we'll talk to you on the back end.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. Good stuff. Wow.
Good stuff, man. Invite her to a dinner party. That'd be fun.
For sure.
She'd have stories to tell. Stories of stories.
Stories of stories.
There's a lot. There's so much nuance. I may have to go back. I don't re-listen to many of our shows.
Yeah.
But that's one I might have to re-listen to. There's some gold that I could not write fast enough to jot down. So
the book is excellent. The book is excellent. I couldn't put it down. I'll just say that.
Okay.
So
I'll add it to the list.
I read over the weekend. I read about 3/4 of it on Saturday and Sunday. So
I was reading Stephen Pressfield over the weekend. So
another good writer. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I like him.
I was going to ask at least if she ever ran into him in Hollywood back in the day, but as he was trying to make it. But anyway, well, I'll let you wrap it up.
All right. You can find us as always, persuasionbythepint.com. This is episode 240. I'm sorry.
240.
428. I'm a little dyslexic. 428, not 248. Check us out on all of your favorite platforms. If you're new to the show, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes. I know we're streaming on YouTube right now. Check us out. Leave us 5 stars. Subscribe. You will love it. We put out an episode every week. And I think we have another great guest joining us next Friday. Sean, one of these days, we're going to have a flight. I promise you.
I've been stacking them up. We'll have a good one.
All right. We'll see you next week.
See ya.